Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us online this evening for our conversation with Cathy Park Hong, Aimee Nezhukumatathil, Sejal Shah, and Piyali Bhattacharya. My name is Lily Philpott, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual event space. For those of you who are new to the Asian American Writers Workshop, we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to uplifting Asian diasporic literature and storytelling. You can visit aaww.org for information about our programs, or you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, where the recording of this event will be posted. During the event, we ask that all audience members practice nonviolence in the chat. Comments that are racist, transphobic, homophobic, ableist, and/or misogynist will be flagged and the person will be removed from this event. We will have time for audience Q&A at the end of the night, and you can leave any questions in the chat. We want to thank our friends at Books Are Magic who provide book sales for the evening. You can find a link to purchase, also in the chat. I am going to read Cathy, Aimee, Sejal, and Piyali's bios, and then I hope you will join me in welcoming Cathy on screen to read. Cathy Park Hong is the author of Minor Feelings, as well as the poetry collections Engine Empire, Dance Dance Revolution, which was chosen by Adrienne Rich for the Barnard Women Poets Prize, and Translating Mom. She is the recipient of the Wyndham Campbell Prize, the Guggenheim Fellowship, and a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship. Aimee Nezhukumatathil is the author of World of Wonders, an illustrated essay collection, as well as 4 books of poetry, including most recently Oceanic, winner of the Mississippi Institute of Arts and Letters Award. Other awards for her writing include fellowships and grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Mississippi Arts Council, and McDowell. Sejal Shah is the author of This Is One Way to Dance, essays on race, place, and belonging. Her stories and essays have appeared in Brevity, Conjunctions, Guernica, the Kenyon Review, LitHub, Longreads, and The Rumpus. She is the recipient of a 2018 NIFA Fellowship in Fiction. Piyali Bhattacharya is the editor of the anthology Good Girls Marry Doctors. The book was awarded gold medals from the Independent Publisher Book Award and the Next Generation Indie Book Award, in addition to receiving a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. Thank you all again so much for joining us. We're so thrilled to have you here. And please join me in welcoming Cathy.
Hi, am I on? Okay. But I want to first say that I'm so psyched to be on this panel with such dazzlingly brilliant writers and who I consider my peers, friends. Sejal, thank you for arranging this. And of course, Aimee and Piyali. So I'm really excited to talk after this. So I'm going to read from Minor Feelings, which came out in February, right before the pandemic hit. And I'm just going to read, and they said I should talk about the book, describe it. It's just a collection of essays I wrote, which is kind of my own very personal take on the Asian American condition, but also my take on this country as an Asian American. So I'm just going to read a little bit, 2 paragraphs in the beginning. I'll read the beginning of The End of White Innocence, which is about whiteness in childhood. Much of my youth was spent looking into the menagerie of white children. Sometimes I was allowed inside by visiting a friend's house, and I marveled at the harmonious balance of order and play. The parents who spoke to each other in a reasonable tone of voice, the unruly terrier who blustered his way into the house and was given a biscuit. Not at all like my home, which was tense and petless, with sharp, witchy stenches, and a mother who hung all her laundry outside, and a grandmother who fertilized our garden plot of scallions with a Folgers can of her own urine. Occasionally at night, I awoke to my name being called, at first faintly, then louder, which I knew was my mother. I rushed out of bed and ran to my parents' bedroom to break up another fight getting out of hand. At school the next day, I distinctly remember the mild sun and the pomegranate trees fully fruited in November. I sat there at lunch, my classmates' laughter far off and watery, in my ears clogged by little sleep. If reality was a freeze, everyone else was a relief, while I felt recessed, the declivity that gave everyone else shape. Any affection I had for my youth was isolated to summers in Seoul. My grandmother bandaging my fingernails with balsam flower petals to stain my nails orange, the fan rotating lazily in the wet heat, while my aunts, uncles, cousins, and I all slept on the floor in the living room, and the cold shock of water when my aunt washed me while I squatted naked in hard rubber slippers. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kathy. So glad to be here with everybody. So wonderful to just see the participants here really, really loud. I wanted to, I changed what I was going to read real quick. I am wearing, I don't know if y'all can see this, I'm wearing a narwhal holiday sweater, but I'm actually not going to read. I was going to read about the narwhal from my book, World of Wonders. And I think I'm going to do something else. A little bit more timely, actually. And yeah, so this is my book, World of Wonders, and there are different illustrations in it. It's a collection of nature essays. And unfortunately, the whale shark that I actually talk about in this book, in the chapter on whale sharks, passed away over Thanksgiving. So I haven't read this ever in person, so I'm going to read this now, just a small little excerpt of the whale shark. And just to set it up, this is my first and only time snorkeling with the whale shark, which had been my lifelong dream. I did this when I was on sabbatical at the Georgia Aquarium. And so I had, as you could see, some conflicting feelings about that. Here it is, the whale shark. When the dive master yelled, "Flat!" my legs seized with terror and my body tried its best to morph in the shape of a pancake. But since I was floating on the surface of the 6 million Ocean Voyager tank at the Georgia Aquarium, and since my ears were submerged, the command sounded more like a bat. Just minutes before, we guest snorkelers had been instructed over and over again, if you hear me shout flat, that means you've got a whale shark swimming directly under you. Flatten your body so your belly doesn't skim her back. I could hardly believe a fish longer and wider than a school bus and weighing more than a fully loaded one would ever be swimming directly below me. I thought for sure I would be swallowed whole by her open mouth. Improbable, of course. Whale sharks only eat plankton and bits of shrimp, and their throats are the size of a quarter. But I could picture it so clearly. My then 2-year-old son would never even remember me, would be haunted forever by the loss of his mother, the first known casualty of being accidentally gummed to bits by a gentle whale shark. Such a dumb legacy to leave him in this way. But at the last possible moment, before I thought Trixie would crash into me, the whale shark sank just low enough to not touch me at all, though her dorsal fins almost brushed up the belly of my wetsuit. If I wanted to, I could have reached down and petted her spotted back when the dive master wasn't looking, but I was too terrified to do anything but float, lifting my belly and curving my back up as far as it would let me as I tried to get out of the shark's way. I'm skipping ahead just a little bit. When all was said and done, I brought back a whale shark hand puppet for my son. When my family picked me up at the airport, I sat with him in the back seat because I needed to see my son's sweet pink cheeks again. I reached into my backpack and gave him the present I'd promised him. He promptly slipped it over his tiny fist, which he unclenched to make the puppet's mouth open, close, open, close, open, close. He giggled in his car seat as my husband drove us all home. It was as if I had never left them at all. Almost a decade later, I visited seas where whale sharks have recently appeared in search of plankton-rich waters, but I've never actually seen one ever again. Mommy, mommy, my son calls out as he hoists his hand puppet over my shoulder. I am a whale shark and I need a snack, please. He crawls into my lap and talks with the puppet for a bit before he makes the puppet turn back to me and ask, where my shark family? Where are they? The whale shark connected to my son contracts, then expands, its furry pink mouth wide again, and pauses there. In my mind, that puppet mouth is still open, waiting for an answer. Perhaps that answer swims in that giant tank where so many of the beautiful and mighty sharks I encountered have long since died and have been replaced and replaced and replaced. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sejal Shah. When I knew my book, This Is One Way to Dance, was going to be published, I dreamt of having an event at the Writers' Workshop, which has been so important to me ever since they published one of my poems in their 1996 anthology, Contours of the Heart. And since I helped launch another anthology, Good Girls, Merry Doctors, South Asian American Daughters on Obedience and Rebellion. And that was 20 years later. From Piyali's introduction, but our worlds were not and are not without struggle. No matter how much access we were given or what our socioeconomic backgrounds were, what we were often not given was the benefit of choice. I thought my book was in part about race, representation, and weddings, but it turned out to be more about gestures, movement, silence, trauma, and speech. This Is One Way to Dance is also a story about genre, about publishing, about writing stories that did not seem to be legible, and finding in the essay form a different way to dance, move through genre, and take up space. Where is the space for silence? My story collection, which is still unpublished, has two different titles that I've used at different times. One is Not Everything Needs to Be Said, and one is Everything Needs to Be Said. Aimee's book reminded me of the importance of play and wonder, and I got out a peacock feather, thinking of it. I wondered what the essay form allowed and offered. Why now? I thought about the essays that have informed my work for so many years, which have been touchstones. Adrienne Rich's Invisibility and Academe, Audre Lorde's The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action, Toni Morrison's The Site of Memory, Bell Hook's Talking Back. I thought of my book at one point as a series of essays with a focus on weddings, but really it became about the lyric essay, images, and objects. I was so excited to learn that Aimee and Cathy had debut essay collections coming out this year because I had followed their work for years. And I struggled to write an essay about my wedding because so much of it had been about sorrow and spectacle, my annoyance at having a white high school classmate elope to a Hindu temple in another city, and the difficulty of writing something about the truth about my life and wedding and my experience of it. In many ways, what I was writing about was sorrow. I found out that my dad was diagnosed with a fast-growing cancer last fall. He's still with us. I don't know if he's read the book, but after reading This Is One Way to Dance, my mother told me she felt she had failed as a mother. I really wanted my father to see the book and to be able to hold it. I could not hide behind a speaker in poetry or in short stories. But essays are also crafted, they are partial, they are not the whole story. And one of the greatest gifts anyone gave to me, or conversations I had with both Mira Jacob and Cathy Park Hong, who both just said, it's excruciating to have personal work out. A book is a kind of performance. I wanted to show a journey and some of my own stories about race, loss, love, dance, getting lost, and finding my way, 1999 to 2019. I'm going to read from a brief essay in my book called Things People Said, an essay in 7 steps. And there's a footnote to the title. 7 is a significant number in Hindu wedding ceremonies. Google it. 1. But did your husband ride in on a horse? South Indians don't ride in on horses. That's North Indian. 2. Was it a big Indian wedding? I mean, how many people? I mean, how many hundreds? You didn't wear a white dress, but was it a traditional wedding? Did you wear a midriff-bearing outfit? I saw a midriff-bearing outfit in that Marigold movie. 3. Even my shrink. Which Indian restaurant would you recommend in the area? I tell him I don't eat Indian food out. I tell him that I only eat Indian food, and we just call it food at my parents' house. I tell him I find this question unprofessional. If he wants my recommendation, let him pay. I'm here for his recommendations, and I pay. Do I look like a country or restaurant guide? My husband, Indian, not that it matters, says, you're just going there for a reason. Ignore everything else. I ruminate, I steam, I think about changing doctors, but there's a shortage of shrinks in our area. 4, but how neat is that you and your husband are both Indian, that you were the only 2 Indians at your job. I mean, it was fated. It's just perfect because you're both Indian. It's perfect. South Asian? I think of that as Vietnamese and Laotian. I mean, why not say Indian? Isn't that what you are? 5, I've never heard of it. I've been to Goa and to Bombay and somewhere else where the Taj Mahal is. I know India has so many dialects, there are like hundreds. Tamil and Gujarati are entirely different languages? Oh, okay, Gujarati. Well, of course, Polish and French are different languages. 6, you don't wear rings? But my daughter's Indian friend had a ring. It was a big diamond. How will people know you were married? Indian weddings, I love how colorful they are. Was it so colorful, like a Bollywood movie? I love all those outfits. Did it take 4 days? My daughter went to an Indian wedding and it took 4 days. 7, if you have any extra invitations, I'd love to be invited. If you have any extra invitations, I'd love to see an Indian wedding. I've never been to one. I mean, they're so beautiful. I mean, I'd really like to go. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Piyali. Cathy and Aimee and Sejal, thank you so much for those beautiful readings. You know, I've spent so much time with each of your books and each of your other books. You know, it's wonderful to hear these stories in your voices. So thank you so much for that. Really lovely. There are a couple of things that I want to say to start us off. The first is that we're here this evening to have a discussion called Racing the Essay. This is a loaded phrase, and it would be impossible to sit here and have this discussion without first acknowledging the many, many contributions of Black and Indigenous artists to this genre and to the entirety of American arts and letters. To write something called an American essay is to stand on the shoulders of those who reveal to us the difficult truths of what America really is. To write nonfiction in America today is an act of giving thanks to those who weren't afraid of nonfiction as a genre and its bombastic truth-telling power. Black and Indigenous voices continue to be at the cutting edge of what we need to learn, what we need to read, and what we need to reflect on to understand race in this country. And so we give our thanks tonight to those who have paved the way. But I also want to acknowledge that we are at the Asian American Writers Workshop, and that this space too has been a space of tremendous safety for so many of us. You know, Sejal spoke about an event that she and I did in this space, not virtually, but a couple of years ago. And it was so powerful, and we felt vibes in that room that were so real. And I just want to talk about the fact that it was really, you know, Sejal's book talks about the fact that the literary landscape in the 90s and early 2000s, it was like, you know, writers like us salivated at the thought of seeing someone like us up on platforms like this. And it was the workshop that shed light not only on these writers, but on the community of readers who were dying for access to these stories. There's a lot of work to do to unspool the ropes of prejudice and racism and casteism and colorism that the Asian community, even especially here in the US, has been spinning for a long time. A year like 2020 provides the opportunity for us to reflect on how far we have to go. And I'm grateful to the Asian American Writers Workshop for throwing open that space for reflection, while also always making space for Asian voices, putting an emphasis on Asian art, for taking into account our many major and minor feelings, for always encouraging dialogue like they have tonight. So the second thing I want to do is just talk a little bit about why, when Sejal and I were putting this panel together, we thought very carefully of who might want to have this conversation with us. And we came up with these remarkable women. And I wanted to talk a little about why I see the three of your books as being in such deep conversation with each other. Cathy, to start with you, in your essay, Stand Up, you explain the term minor feelings. And I'm so interested in that term because of the emphasis on the word minor, which I suspect is how many Asian Americans feel every day. I thought we could alight on these particular words. You write, "My term minor feelings is deeply indebted to theorists Cyan and Guy, who wrote extensively on the affective quality of ugly feelings, negative emotions like envy, irritation, and boredom, symptomatic of today's late capitalist gig economy. Like ugly feelings, minor feelings are non-cathartic states of emotion with a remarkable capacity for duration." I just want to pause on that word duration for a moment because it brought up so many things for me. Specifically, it brought up, of course, microaggressions, because the term microaggression is already diminutive. We as Asians are seen as diminutive and even diminished people, which Cathy touches on in the book. We often don't count in the lexicon of American race, which many times is quite literally black and white. So if I add all of that up, I can point even in myself to a kind of low-level simmering rage. And it's always right there. It's enduring. I endure it. And so it's always ready to either bubble up and overflow, which it sometimes does, or worse, make me go dark deep within myself. Sejal, your essay, and I'm so glad you read this, Things People Said, is a brilliant rendition of this feeling because it compresses into just a few pages, stacks and stacks of microaggressions, which makes the reader by the end feel simultaneously angry to bursting and also completely deflated. I'm just gonna read a few lines, although you've already just read this, but you mentioned these lines. "Did you ride in on a horse? Was it a big Indian wedding? Tamil and Gujarati are entirely different languages? Never heard of it. Oh, it's like different cultures? Of course, Polish and French are different languages." I mean, you just read this and we were all, I think, feeling just the tremendous weight of all of those lines compressed together. When you stack them up like that, you can see the effect they're having. And yet, when I think of microaggressions and minor feelings, and specifically when I think of the word duration, I also think of this other line from Sejal's essay, Kinship, Cousins, and Khichdi, where she writes, "The only India I know lives in North America." That line is so important to me because it underscores how much we are all of us, othered, femme, people of color, all of that, all of us on this panel are still uniquely American creatures. In a parallel vein, I think of the word duration. I think of us as being American creatures. I think of how small we are in the vision of our country. And I think of what endures, and I'm led straight to Aimee's work. World of Wonders also deals with minor feelings. This is a world which wants little brown girls to go fast. This is a world that will always make fun of the daughter of a Filipina mother and an Indian father for having Chinese eyes. It is amazing to see what this adolescent and then young woman and then professor sees of herself reflected in the world around her. Unable to detect herself among the important media and political presences of her own country, she finds herself in nature, in the smile of an axolotl, in the feminist stance of a touch-me-not plant. She writes, "How I wish I could fold inward and shut down predators with one touch. Touch me not in the subway, touch me not on the train, touch me not in the green room right before I go on stage. Touch me not at a faculty party. Touch me not if you are a visiting writer. Touch me not at the post office when I'm waiting to send a letter to my grandmother. Let me and my children and everyone's children decide who touches them and who touches them not. Touch them not, touch them not." In passages like these, I find that two things have a great duration, to use Cathy's word again. One of them, of course, is racism, and the way we have been taught to respond to it with only minor feelings. But the other, should we decide to look at it, is wonder. Aimee, in your world, the wonder and whimsy of nature is your antidote to minor feelings. It is also your healing from the pain of seeing yourself reflected nowhere in a country that doesn't always claim you. So my first question to all of you revolves around all of these things. I want to know, given a world in which we are taught that only minor feelings exist, and that we, as both Asians and as creative writers, are often too minor even to exist, what is the work of creative writing right now? What is the work of the writer, and how does she hold the deflation of minor feelings in one hand while centering both the Asian and the writer in a major way in the other? Is writing the antidote to minor feelings and microaggressions? And what role does the writer, not the analyst or the scientist, but the artist, play in moving these conversations forward?
Such good questions, Piyali. I don't know if you had a set order or if we just jump in, and I think I'm casual and have everybody jump in and stuff. So that's like a whole essay answer that I could give. It's so great to just be seen, by your close reading of all of us. I think this is just going to begin the answer to the question, and that is, I think what we've all seen here, just in our small little samplings of our writing, is that there's no one experience to represent Asian American writing, and then if you break it down further, and I'm speaking just for nature writing here, nature writing, or nature is so diverse, humans are so diverse, so why not have more representation within the genres too? And in particular, I'm thinking nature writing, the books that I saw growing up, Thoreau and Annie Dillard and John Muir, all hugely important, monumental works to me. None of them have brown skin, and it's just so weird. Like, we are outside. Why was that work not being published? I know it was being written, but why was it not being published? I'm not the first by any means, but just why have there not been others written? So what I love about Cathy and Sejal's work is that I think we all are just opening the doors more and kicking it down even more, to say that these are not minor feelings. These are not minor situations whatsoever. They're very real. And I think we're all done putting our work in context with the white gaze. You know what I mean? I think, and so I love the humor in Cathy's title in particular. I love that in Sejal's title, this is one way to dance. It's an assertion, that she has another way to dance that maybe has not been included, in pop culture as widely too. So I think this is all just a big way of saying that we're here, we've been here. This is not new and groundbreaking per se, but and we still have a long way to go, in terms of making this more equitable and not just being represented, but also not having the gaze be focused on on white writers, and then, oh, we're joining in the conversation too, that kind of thing. Anyway, I'm curious to hear what Cathy and Sejal have to say too.
Yeah, Piyali, thank you so much for your incredibly generous introduction. And I agree, that's a very good question. It's a really broad question. And I'm like thinking of all the different ways I can answer that. I think, Aimee, you answered a part of what I would say. I mean, maybe to kind of focus it a little bit to the panel, we could talk about the essay and what that does, what we're trying to do with it. Because I think like the way I approach poetry, for instance, is different than the way I approach the essay. And, and thank you for what you were saying about minor feelings. And I think one really important function of writing, one really important function of the essay is that it kind of serves as a sort of diagnostic tool. And it's like, when you're really sick and you don't know what's wrong with you, it's like the most estranging and alienating feeling, because you don't know if you can die the next day, or, you think of like the worst symptoms, right, that you might have. Like when I immediately think I have cancer, right? When I have like an achy knee or something, but, and then to diagnose it is a tremendous amount of relief. You're like, okay, now it's focused, there's a language for that affliction that you have, and then it becomes tangible and legible. I mean, it's kind of like also the way psychotherapy or the talking cure works. Once you say it out loud, suddenly whatever is afflicting you becomes legible, right? And so I think that's what I was doing with minor feelings, was that I was like, here is this range of, I don't even want to say racial trauma, maybe like more the racial condition, that's not being discussed, that's not being written about. And I felt the need to kind of put a name to it, and also to ask questions. I mean, earlier you were saying about how we are so indebted to Black and Indigenous writers. And one of the writers who I was really inspired by, like everyone else, is James Baldwin. And I think he like has the best quote for art making or essays, which is to lay bare the questions hidden by answers. So the book that I was writing was more just to ask more questions, to continue the discussion and so forth about where we stand as an Asian American, as Asian Americans, without any kind of it. And I think more than like these identity markers, I was trying to kind of expand what consciousness is, and think about the different ways we can think about consciousness as well. So that's just the beginning. I mean, there's so much more to say, and I think another one one more thing I would say about the essay is that as opposed to say poetry or fiction, is that I approach the essay, because it seems more, I think Alex Chi was saying this too, it seems more of an activating genre, you know, whereas it's like, it's more about, well, I mean, to put it crudely, it just like cuts to the chase, and it can, like, you know, it just kind of cuts through the bullshit. And I think I was just trying to cut through the bullshit. And also, you know, for me, when I read Baldwin or say Kiese Lehman, or, you know, it activates me to kind of think differently and act. But then, of course, all art forms, poetry, fiction, and so forth, teaches you to think differently.
I always have to then think about, like, what was the question? So, I was thinking, Aimee, as you spoke about the beginning of your essay, Catalpa Tree. Am I pronouncing that right? Yeah, a catalpa can give two brown girls in Western Kansas a green umbrella from the sun. Don't get too dark, our mother would remind us as we ambled out into the relentless Midwestern light. And I was thinking about how often, and that my husband and I were talking about how often we were told that in the sun, the worry about getting dark, and also just the specificity and in your essay, in that essay, brought me back to, we had friends whose parents were psychiatrists at a local state hospital, which is very close to where I live now, and that experience of being on the grounds and what that essay can do with, I think, just rendering this moment and being specific. And when I was reading Minor Feelings, and Cathy, I was listening to you on NPR today on what you posted, and just, you know, there was the other side of it for me, like with essays, you know, do I have to teach an entire history lesson about Asian American studies, right? Like, who is my audience? And that was really something that I struggled with in putting my book together. And I had to keep, is it writers? Is it, who is it? And Aimee, I was thinking, I don't know if you've ever read this book, if you know this book, Tiger on the Mountain.
Yeah.
My fourth grade teacher gave this to me, and it's a little Tamil boy who's looking for orchids in India. There's more, but just the rendering of nature in your essays made me think about that. It's, you know, who gets to write what stories? When do we get to hear them? Do you have to provide an entire history lesson? I was surprised by how many people were liked an essay that I wrote called Temporary Talismans about postcards. And it made me think about what the other essays were that I didn't include in my book that weren't specifically about race, because race is in everything. So it was so thrilling to have my book come out this year in the same year as your books, and Jaswinder Bolina's Of Color, and just to see that there's space and the diversity of kinds of essays.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you guys are all sort of touching on the essay, because that was actually, it's the next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, and you've already touched on it a little bit, but the essay, that's what we're here to talk about. And one of the things that really strikes me is this question of genre. And so I just wanted to ask you a question about genre, and to start you off, I wanted to share two passages. The first is from Cathy. She writes, "Minor feelings occur when American optimism is enforced upon you, which contradicts your own racialized reality. You are told things are so much better, while you think things are the same. You are told Asian Americans are so successful, while you feel like a failure." This excerpt to me is directly related to one of my favorite essays in Sejal's book called Skin, in which a young South Asian American woman thinks through how she responds to attention from both men and women of different races. She writes, "The brown boys are silent. Sometimes there is a table of them sitting on the far side of the blue wall. They talk and laugh in Hindi. We pass each other on the street embarrassed. If we looked, we'd have to say hello." Both of these passages remind me so much of Neil Patel's story collection, which is called "If You See Me, Don't Say Hi." That is a fiction book that is dealing with so many of these issues. And the reason why I bring up these passages is that they imply that to live in a country which doesn't see you means that you can't ever even look clearly at each other. Because if you did, you'd have to acknowledge to each other how unwhole each of you really is. So to be seen then, especially by your own community and by your own self, requires a kind of bold leap of outspokenness. And I wonder if that's what's happening in all your work, because the truth is, and you guys sort of touched on this, you're all originally writers of other genres. Aimee and Cathy are poets, and Sejal is a trained fiction writer. And yet we're sitting here discussing each of your essay collections. And I should say that this was true for me too. I'm also a fiction writer who found quite by accident that my first book was a book of nonfiction essays, and not really sure how that happened. And then, you know, I'm sitting here with you guys and I'm starting to see it. And so I wanted to ask you this question, sort of, what made you make the bold jump to nonfiction? What was it that nonfiction made you, what was it that nonfiction made you feel more seen? Was it what Cathy was saying, that nonfiction can sort of cut through a little bit more? In what way was nonfiction the right medium for what you were trying to say? And I'll add just a little asterisk on the end of that, which is my own little sort of creative writer question, which is, how do you decide when to deploy the lyric essay versus when something needs to be written a little more chronologically? And we can save that if you want. It bleeds into my last question, which is actually a crafts question. But more importantly, what made you guys switch genres? What made you write this moment in this way for nonfiction?
Maybe, I have a ready answer for that. It's a question that I got asked a lot. But you know, actually, my MFA is a dual MFA in poetry and nonfiction. I just happened to poetry just kind of came a little bit more naturally to me, but half of my thesis in grad school was nonfiction. So the earliest versions of some of these essays actually were from my thesis. But I think, actually going back to what Cathy said, and I almost forgot about that James Baldwin quote. I'm so glad that you brought that up. But I start all my poems with an image. I start my essays with a question. And it might be, and the question made, I'd say 80% of the time is not even in the essay, you know, but I write it to myself. I do everything longhand. I'm such a sucker. My close friends know this. I write in pencil. I'm really old fashioned. I feel like I'm in another century, but I love pencils. I love the and so the question is maybe 3 or 4 questions on the top of the page. And then I just kind of go through and try to answer. Sometimes I'm answering a question that's not even there, but I'm always starting with a question. And so I guess maybe I would say to tackle on what, you know, actually, and I can pinpoint it to 2016, actually to even a person when the last election happened. You know, I had been writing essays for a while, but something kind of like cracked and with rage in me, you know, and I'm a genuinely normally happy, upbeat person, but I had so much rage and anger that I didn't know what to do with it. After the results of the election, I could not contain that in a poem. I know some people can, I could not. I did not want to see I didn't want to listen to the line break. I didn't want to me, that was one more rule that I didn't want to follow. Or someone telling me I need to break a line break, even though it's me. This is way ultra dramatic, but it's the truth. I really didn't want to listen to line breaks. And I just wanted to stretch out and unfurl in an essay without anybody telling me that, no, you need to put this in a stanza. And the essay form kind of refound me again, that kind of thing. And I was like, gosh, this is nice. I'm not worrying about tension, but everything else, music, rhythm, metaphor, is all a part of my writing, no matter what genre. But yeah, I simply did not want to listen to another rule or guideline that I felt like I needed to follow. And just to answer the last part of your question, I don't know if I'm going to sit and say this is going to be a lyric essay or traditional essay, but I will say that when I want to tell a story, first this happened, and you know what? Psst, this happened too, and then also this happened too. That's when it's going to be a little bit more traditional. But when I want to be witchy, when I want to make the reader displaced because I am displaced, that's when I go for the lyric. When I want to mimic what I'm feeling and to unsettle the reader because I am unsettled, that's when I want to go a little bit lyric. Yeah. Other people, yeah.
I love what you were saying about not worrying about the line break, because like I think I've been feeling that way too, where I just where I find the lyric form to be a shirt size too small. It's too tight. I need to like get out. But in general, I've never, even like when I was writing poetry, I've never believed in genres. I don't like to think about my work in genres. And when I was writing in Dance Dance Revolution and Engine Empire, they're like cross genre. They're also kind of sort of infuriatingly hard to categorize, which is sort of endeared readers and also frustrated readers. And it's the same approach to my essay writing, which is that it's like I wasn't thinking critical essay or lyric essay. I just started writing. And I've said this a lot in previous interviews, but it was a long journey to the essay. I know that I wanted to write I've always written about race, but like I wanted to really kind of do it autobiographically, which I'm not an autobiographical poet. And I just wanted to tackle it. And the lyric was somehow too tight, too cloistered for me to really tackle it. I even tried fiction. So in a way, like the essay, Minor Feelings is like this palimpsest of failed forms, like all writers or some writers, I'm always cannibalizing myself. And like, I was just, there was just like ghosts of failed poems and, passages from the first chapter of my failed novel and everything. And it was really just kind of patching it together, which is how I always start, and which I'm trying to start now, is sort of patching my thoughts together. In terms of why it ended up being an essay, I don't know. Another little point I like to make about the essay is that it's very capacious. It's like a coalition of genres. You could say that for poetry. You could say that for fiction, and I think what I have written prose before. I mean, I was a journalist in my 20s, and so I'm used to, I have had experience doing some investigative reporting. I've also written criticism. I've written reviews and so forth. And so I was used to writing different forms of nonfiction, but it was much more compartmentalized. And I wanted to kind of use all the different systems of knowledge just to kind of, give more nuance to my thinking. And I was also thinking, and this is like what I really appreciated about essay writing, was that I didn't want to just write about my own experience. I also wanted to write about other people's experiences to show, really how, and I didn't even, it's still the very like tiniest tip of the iceberg when I was talking about the Asian American perspective, right? But one way of doing it was through criticism. It was a way of like kind of amplifying the voices of others by writing about other people's works. And so I was like, I can't write about the Black experience, or I can't write about the South Asian experience, but I could write about Richard Pryor, or I could write about like Prageeta Sharma, you know. So that was a way of kind of also just opening up and kind of you know, representing the collective experience by using criticism as a way to kind of amplify other voices. So that was, and so that was, it was important for me to do that. And, but I don't really, I find genre to be really narrow. I mean, even now, like when I'm trying to think of what to do for my next book, and I was like, I'm sort of frustrated. I'm like, I don't want to think, like, it's like when you write a poem, you're not thinking, is this poem going to be fiction or nonfiction? You just write the poem, you know, and it's like, I just think it's such, but I think it's also really actually, no, in the time of Trump, it's very important to, to determine fact from fiction, very much so. But in other respects, I find these boundaries to be a little bit kind of artificial too.
Piyali, you quoted from my piece Skin, which was originally a short story. It was part of my MFA fiction thesis. And I just went and grabbed this. This is an Indiana review that Aimee and I have work in from, oh my God. Aimee, I think you do. Yeah, you do. I don't know, 2004 maybe. So I had this whole life as a fiction writer, and I have, and my first publications were in poetry. So I'm not sure, I mean, I was writing nonfiction also, but I've written about this for poets and writers in these craft capsules about also my issues with genre and categories. And I think some of it comes down to who's editing, right? Both of my editors at the University of Georgia Press are Black. Valerie Boyd, who reached out to me when she read Things People Said in Brevity, and Walter Biggins, who's now moved on to UPenn Press. But just, you know, who's making these decisions? And I think in my book, I have an opening poem, Prelude, which was cut from an earlier version of Matrimonials, which was called Introductions, which was the introduction to my MFA thesis, and it was about weddings. So I love that, Cathy, what you were saying about cannibalizing work. I mean, I had other versions of this manuscript that were, it was a finalist at 6 presses, I think. So nonfiction was the door that opened. But I think that it's important I think that there were many of us who were writing short fiction, I think, who did not get through for years. And that, I think, really has to do with publishing and gatekeepers. I mean, I got an academic job beating out hundreds of people for a job as a fiction writer, and then wasn't able to get my book published. So there was that too. I also, at one time I had these, my book was in parts, and it was women's studies, area studies, American studies. And I think that also is about genre and an audience, speaking back to who are you writing to? So, and going back to my book, Prelude was a kind of introduction. I have an introduction that was an introduction, and then Matrimonials was another kind of introduction. And I think that, again, was an attempt to try to speak to these different audiences.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Sejal, just because I feel like you're preempting exactly the things that I wanted to touch on, and that's exactly what I was thinking about, especially when you guys were talking. You know, I'm really interested in what you guys have to say about why nonfiction, and I think that absolutely bleeds into the question that you guys are all touching on of what is craft. First of all, like, does genre even have boundary, and also what is craft? And you know, my last question, and then maybe we'll have a question or two from the audience, but my last question, which is my favorite one, is about craft. Aimee, your book is crafted entirely out of images of the natural world and how they relate to the difficulties and sweetnesses of your life. Sejal, you just mentioned this, and I'm so glad you did. Your book employs many different kinds of craft. Some essays are shaped like a university course catalog. I'm thinking of the essay curriculum. Some, like Skin, almost read like flash fiction short stories, which you just told us is in fact the case. And I love that piece can sort of like cross boundaries in that way. Cathy, your book is often telling the histories of both scholars and artists who have come before you and using their examples to throw their worlds open to us, but also as a springboard for your own ideas, as you were saying before, that, you know, you sort of take Richard Pryor, you take Brigitte Sharma, and you like sort of craft something that is yours out of the stories that they told. So I wanted to ask you guys about craft, and I want to be specific that I'm asking this question because I feel like it's common to hear that writers of race or gender or sexuality write sort of worthy, important work that is sometimes more concerned with content than it is with craft. And of course, I find this to be ridiculous because craft is nothing if there's no content to base it in. And of course, content is nothing without craft. Like, racism exists in the way we fashion our sentences, and the demolition of it also exists in the way we fashion our sentences. And so I wanted to ask, what makes a well-crafted piece to you, and how do you choose the form or craft of your pieces?
By the way, I was thinking there's a lot of really great questions in the chat box. So I was thinking maybe because we're getting towards the end, we could maybe fold some of the questions into your question about craft, because I think maybe a lot of these questions also have to do with craft too. So yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, if you don't mind, then I'll just add that there's a great question about craft and content coming from Amy Tan, where she says, something I've been thinking about in writing my Chinese and Asian American memoir is about how much we focus on trauma in Asian American writing. I was wondering what you all think about writing about Asian American joy, and if you have examples of writing that focus on joy and liberation.
I could start. I mean, unless, Amy, were you about to say something?
I was finishing reading up the question a little bit. Like, go ahead, Cathy, and I'll chime in.
I can, you know, I feel like, you know, I think reading Amy's book, World of Wonders, brings me a lot of joy. And also, I think like joy can also be very subversive. And I think joy can also be an emotional force that's a form of resistance. And I think I wish there was more joy in my writing. I think I take joy, like in my poetry, I take joy in language. I take joy in, yeah, and like kind of creating these different worlds. And I write about this one film in Minor Feelings, Wu Sang's documentary about this trans club, Silver Platter, and it was like there was a night called Wildness where all the kind of it was sort of it was a trans night, but the bar was actually not just about it wasn't just for like trans people, it was like Mexican trans. And there was a quote in there where they were saying, like, you know, it's not just about like resistance, is not just about like reacting against what's oppressing you. It's also about creating your own world. And so that's really important to me, I think, as a poet and writer, is to create my own world. Minor Feelings, I think, has probably less of that. But, you know, for me, for instance, I was like, you know, I've been writing about just these little pieces about my daughter. And there is some, I don't know, maybe it's, you know, maybe it's because I'm a parent or something. There's definitely, there's so little joy in 2020, you know, and it's like, it's just rage all the time. I'm feeling rage constantly. And what I've been trying to do is just kind of really make space, or really kind of um, really make space for just the little kind of moments of solace that I have with my daughter. And weirdly, it's nature. I was always someone who was really not into nature at all. I couldn't tell you if I like wouldn't. I'm like, okay, that's a tree, and that's another tree, and that's a tree too. And but I really kind of, it's a way to bring, I find like the natural world to be very healing in a way. And so that's one sort of, and I've been sort of writing about that. And it's nice to have that kind of quiet and tranquility to write about that. But I feel like Aimee, you can speak more to that.
And I love your answers, Cathy, on that. And I want to say too that there's a place. It's funny you said like, oh, I wish I wrote more joy. I wish sometimes like, oh, I wish I could be as serious and as critical eyes like Cathy, that kind of thing. So I think we all go to our strengths, But I will also tell you that even just I remember the first time I encountered. In your book, the thing about peeing in a coffee cup can brought me so much joy. It was just to see that in black and white, to see that this is going to be an uncomfortable book sometimes. That brought me so much joy, just thinking like, I can't wait what white people are going to think about this. You know what I mean? So that brought me delight. And what I would just say, what I would just add to that is that, I think we're all about the same age here. We grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I think it's very deliberate. I say this a lot in interviews, but what I don't say, that I feel freer saying now with the Asian American Writers Workshop, is that I think it was very deliberate. I'm always lamenting, oh, I didn't grow up with people in pop culture that even remotely looked like me, like Wonder Woman, Cher. Those were about the only brunettes that I saw in the 70s and 80s. I'm not kidding. My students can't even hardly believe it, but I watched MTV all the time. It wasn't until something like the Macarena, and that was what, 94, that I ever saw like an Indian woman with hot pants on, and she just was beautiful, and but I think that's very purposeful, that there was no instances of an Asian American woman that I can remember having a smile in any movies or books or anything like that. I think that's very deliberate. So for the longest time, I think I kind of was like, oh, I don't know if this is cool to express this. I don't know. I mean, in real life, my friends know I am unabashed with, saying, look at this flower. I mean, my husband always is a little worried when I almost drive off the road, like, look at the moon, and I almost like literally cause an accident because I'm just exclaiming in joy. But I find that when we are kids, you don't ever have to teach a kid to express enthusiasm on anything. Look at this truck, look at this French fry, look at the moon, that kind of thing. Something happens though, and it's probably because society tells us that that's not great, or a brown woman shouldn't smile, or if you do, you'll get it solicited, unwanted, commentary, that kind of thing. So I find great empowerment in smiling, in laughing with my head tilted back, and doing that in my writing, because I didn't simply see that. I would have loved to have seen a moment where an Asian American is smiling or just being, outdoors, that kind of thing. And, in my dear friend, and many of you know him, Ross Gay's Book of Delights, he talks about, there's one delight, in particular where, and it's a very different thing that he talks about, being a half black, half white man. And there was actually a group of us who were all brown skin at a taco shop, and we were shushed. We were shushed because we were laughing too loud. And we were just expressing joy, but it was like, shh, be quiet. Like, you know what I mean? I guarantee, and you all know this, it was a group of white people laughing, we would not be shushed, that kind of thing. And it was just like expressing joy. So there's this weird policing and surveillance on who gets to express joy and smile in media, who gets to be the carefree woman laughing in commercials. So if you feel like you want to do that, do it. It's such a great subversive form of resistance. And if you don't, that's also okay. We need the serious stuff too. I want my rage to be seen. I want my sadness and frustrations to be seen as well. And I think many of us do too.
I just want to quickly add that pissing off white people gives me a lot of joy.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
No, but I was also going to say, like, laughter is so important. Comedy is so important. It's a crucial part of writing and what inspires me. And I just like love, that's why I love like comedians of color. And it's like laughter is totally subversive. Like I write about Ralph Ellison and that like sort of, he writes about, it might be fictional, having like laugh barrels in town in the South, where if Black people were laughing, they were forced to like, laugh into the barrel so other white people wouldn't hear it because they were threatened by laughter. So it's like, in a way, joy can also be threatening, but it's also why it's so much more precious, and you just have to just let it out. Sejal.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to just talk about dancing. I mean, that I grew up dancing, and that for me is a place of joy. I was worried about even getting dressed for this event because I just, did not want to get out of my pajamas, and I was thinking Amy's going to be in this like wonderful, colorful stuff, and I would rather be in black. But thank you, Cathy. You're also wearing black. I wear black in my head. But what I was going to say is, but I think that that dancing and turning, and I can't even now, but that's, I feel like that's where the joy is for me. And that's what I hoped would come across in my book, even though I think for me my path, there was a lot of, I think there was a lot of silence and there was a lot of anger. I loved what you were saying, Amy, about, I think we grew up around the same time, and the local paper here asked me after I'd pitched, to have them write something about my book after Kamala Harris was vice president-elect, and they were like, "Great, this can you write us something about Kamala Harris, because you both have a parent from India." And I thought, well, I'm just so fucking relieved that Trump is out. The point of my book was not about identity in that way. So I think any way we can get around, I think we know the white gaze. I think we know how people see us, but to put forth how we see things. And I had much more to say about Obama and Hillary Clinton for various reasons that don't have to do with actually with Obama, my mother's from Kenya, so a little bit there, but it's like, I don't know. I think balancing the anger and the joy. And I'm really grateful. I just want to say this about the lyric essay, which I think brought me, it was two poets, Lisa Williams and Philip White, who read my essay Street Scene and said, I think this is a lyric essay. I hadn't heard that term, and I feel like that brought me back to being in conversation with poets. And that's where I began as a poet, although that's not what I'm known for.
That's so beautiful, Sejal, and thank you guys all for expressing joy and for talking about expressing joy. I was just thinking for like a second while you guys were talking that I think it's so easy to get mired in the sort of rage that we write about. But one of the things that I'm just thinking of as a writer, we all, even just as writers, we complain about the act of writing all the time. But one of the things that I'm thinking about in terms of joy is also that as a writer, and especially as an Asian American woman writer, specificity gives me a lot of joy. I think that when I'm able to find the words for the thing that I've been feeling for a long time and not really been able to say, it feels like I've been able to like spit something out that I've been choking on almost. And that it gives like a feeling of incredible relief and incredible joy to think that actually this thing that we do, this incredibly ethereal, random, crazy thing that we do is actually a form of its own that brings that it in itself, the act of it can bring joy, even if the thing that we're writing about is a difficult thing. Just the act of writing, I said it before, but like, Cathy's sort of response, to what minor feelings are, and sort of Amy's response to the world of wonders, maybe the antidote is whimsy to minor feelings, maybe that's what it is. Sejal twirling, that was just my favorite, like it's on the cover of your book, and it's in our Zoom chat now. I don't know that we have time for any more questions. I know that we do have to wrap up really soon. There were so many more really, really interesting questions in the chat box. And I know that that there are so many of you that had so many wonderful things to say. I know that Lily is gonna take over our chat in just a second, but I just thought if one of you, if you could each go around and just name one other book that you would like people to be thinking of in this moment, whether it relates to craft or joy or Asian American essay or anything, what do you want to leave us with in terms of emphasis on other people's work?
Such a there's so
Okay. I got Familiars, Holly Wren Spalding, poems about nature, being in nature. This is a really important book for this moment. How We Show Up, Mia Birdsong, Reclaiming Family, Friendship, and Community. Everybody needs to read this book. And Disability, Visibility, First Person Stories from the 21st Century, Alice Wong.
I think you have one title. Do you have one off the top of your head, Cathy? I'm looking here at my library.
It's really hard for me when I can only name one title.
Yeah, this is an impossible question.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many books. I mean, like I love Rick Barrett's Galleons and Don Mi Choi's series Hardly War, which is just so, I mean, they're both so brilliant in different ways. Or oh my God, I can't even, I want to name all of them. And now that I want to name all of them, I'm drawing a blank. I guess I would say like, Rick Barrett's Galleons is just so, if we're talking about joy, it's so exquisite, just the writing, and it's so worldly and it's so intimate, and it has the way he kind of creates these worlds as a way to kind of write about global capitalism and colonialism. And it's like you're looking at these like exquisite miniature paintings, those miniature dollhouse paintings. And then when you look up really close, you're like, oh my God, that's unsettling, and also Don Mi Choi, who is just incredible. And I'm sorry for not that we didn't get to all your questions. I wish we could answer. There were some really great questions that I wish we could have gotten to. There was one. I just want to say there was one question about being nice, and that's something that about being nice about people you write about, and that's something that I think about all the time. It's very, very hard. And I would say another writer who is not nice is Rachel Cusk. She's very cruel, but that's also what makes her an incredible writer. But that's a different kind of risk that I'm always negotiating, So anyway.
Yeah. I would just say, I put it in the chat there that if you don't have one already, I'm constantly surprised at how many people who don't have this. Get yourself a field guide of wherever you live right now. And it could be a field guide of trees of where you are, a field guide to birds of where you are, butterfly. There's very, very specific ones. There's even a field guide to the planet. So just get that. I feel like field guides can unlock so much. And then I dropped in the chat, Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass. It's been out for over 5 years now, so it's not new by any. What's that?
It's brilliant.
Oh, okay, good. You read it, Piyali? It's just, I just feel like wrapped in a big shawl around it, and yet it also activates me. It also makes me want to do stuff, to be active, and yet it also soothes me. So it's really good for 2020. I feel like as we're wrapping up, going into the darkest parts of the winter, you know, that kind of thing. So those would be my suggestions as well. Yeah.
Mm.
These poems are a bomb. Familiars.
Thank you all so much. I'm so, so grateful for this conversation, for these book recommendations. I want to thank everyone in the chat again for these questions, for the parallel conversation and the resources that are being shared, the questions that are being answered while they're asked in the chat. Thank you so much for interacting, for being here, for sharing this space with us. We're so grateful. I want to call, as always, for a virtual round of applause in the chat for Piyali, for Aimee, Sejal, and Cathy. Thank you so much. I have a couple of very quick closing notes from the workshop. Tomorrow, December 2nd, we are live streaming a conversation with Jeffreen Udin, our executive director, and Aro Kwan. They'll be sharing a little bit about updates from the workshop. That will be on YouTube. On December 7th, we're going to close out our virtual open mic series for the year with an amazing open mic hosted and curated by Kay Ulende Barrett. On December 10th, Jeffreen again will be in conversation with Kavita Das, discussing her book Poignant Song, which is on the life and legacy of Lakshmi Shankar. And you can RSVP, you can find out more on our website. Thank you again to Books Are Magic. There are links to purchase everyone's books in the chat. Please do so. Please support an independent bookstore, a local independent bookstore if you're based in New York City while doing so. And I just want to mention as well, this event was recorded. It will be on YouTube. It will be a podcast episode on AAWW Radio if you want to share, if you want to revisit this conversation. So thank you all again so much for such a beautiful evening, and have a great night. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.